The concept of ego is deeply woven into the fabric of human psychology and spirituality. Often misunderstood as simply arrogance or self-importance, the ego is more accurately described as the aspect of the self that engages with the external world. It serves as a filter through which we perceive reality, interpreting experiences and situations according to a constructed self-identity. While the ego serves necessary functions, like helping us navigate social situations and aiding in decision-making, it can also be a source of suffering and separation when it becomes the dominant force in our lives. One of the primary roles of the ego is to differentiate the self from others. It is concerned with identity, personal survival, and seeking validation. This differentiation is necessary for individual development and social functioning, but can also lead to a sense of separation. When we become overly identified with our ego, we tend to see ourselves as distinct entities disconnected from others, which can generate a sense of loneliness and isolation. In the pursuit of external validation and acknowledgement, the ego constantly compares and competes. It thrives on hierarchy and success, drawing self-worth from external circumstances like wealth, status, and relationships. This external focus can often lead to a cycle of constant striving, where contentment and happiness are always just around the next corner, but never truly attained. As a result, people can find themselves trapped in a perpetual state of wanting, which breeds dissatisfaction and suffering. Moreover, the ego's inclination to separate and categorize extends beyond self-identity into the realm of judgment and evaluation. Because the ego relies on differentiation, it naturally creates a divide between what is deemed good or bad, us or them, thereby reinforcing a dualistic worldview. This often results in various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and conflict on both personal and collective levels. When it comes to emotional suffering, the ego plays a significant role as well. Emotions like fear, anxiety, and anger often have roots in ego-based thinking. Fear of loss, for example, can create anxiety. Perceived threats to self-image can spark anger. The ego's habitual patterns of thought, such as rumination and worry, can exacerbate emotional turmoil, creating a cycle of suffering that is challenging to break free from. Interestingly, the ego is also highly resistant to change, as it perceives change as a threat to its existence. Any form of criticism or challenge to our beliefs or self-image is often met with defensiveness or denial, mechanisms aimed at preserving the ego's constructed reality. This resistance can hinder personal growth and lead to a stagnation of the spirit, further contributing to suffering. In summary, while the ego is an integral part of human experience, serving necessary functions in our interaction with the world, its tendency to separate, categorize, and seek external validation can lead to various forms of suffering. Whether through the emotional distress of always seeking and never finding, or the societal discord bred from its divisive tendencies, the ego's role in creating separation and suffering cannot be ignored. Being aware of this can be the first step in minimizing its influence and finding a path to greater unity and contentment. The quest for personal transformation and spiritual growth often leads us to confront the limitations imposed by the ego. While the ego serves essential functions in daily life, such as helping us navigate complex social landscapes and make decisions, it can also become a barrier to genuine connection and inner peace. It's where the practices of self-awareness and mindfulness come into play, serving as powerful tools for dissolving the ego's grip on our lives. Self-awareness involves turning the lens of attention inward to examine one's thoughts, feelings, and motives. Instead of getting swept away by emotions or reactive patterns, self-awareness enables us to pause and ask ourselves why we feel a certain way or why we are inclined to respond in a particular manner. It also helps us recognize when our perception is being colored by ego-driven biases or past conditioning. Over time, the cultivation of self-awareness can loosen the ego's hold, freeing us from reflexive patterns of behavior and opening the door to more conscious choice and action. Mindfulness complements self-awareness by anchoring this internal exploration in the present moment. Instead of being lost in thought or distracted by external stimuli, mindfulness teaches us to be fully engaged with the here and now. This practice can be incredibly freeing, as the ego often derives its power from preoccupation with the past or anxiety about the future. By focusing intently on the present, mindfulness deprives the ego of the temporal landscape where it thrives, gradually diminishing its influence. When combined, self-awareness and mindfulness can foster a state of detached observation where we can witness our thoughts and emotions without becoming entangled in them. This observational stance allows us to separate our core self from the swirl of thoughts and feelings that the ego generates, granting us a clearer perspective on our true nature. Over time, this can lead to profound shifts in how we relate to ourselves and the world around us. For instance, we may find that we no longer need external validation to feel complete, or that our sense of well-being is increasingly independent of external circumstances. The practices of self-awareness and mindfulness also have a harmonizing effect on our relationships with others. As we become more aware of our ego-driven impulses, such as the need to be right or the desire for recognition, we can choose more empathetic and cooperative ways of interacting. This can lead to deeper, more authentic connections, breaking down the walls of separation that the ego so often erects. Moreover, these practices are not limited to any specific form of meditation or spiritual discipline. They can be incorporated into daily life in practical ways. From taking a few mindful breaths during a stressful situation to periodically checking in with oneself during the day to assess one's mental and emotional state, self-awareness and mindfulness can be accessible and applicable for everyone. In summary, self-awareness and mindfulness are invaluable tools for dissolving the ego's influence and fostering a deeper sense of connection to oneself and others. By helping us step back from reactive patterns and automatic responses, they allow us to navigate life's challenges with greater equanimity and wisdom. Over time, this can lead to a profound transformation, one that is marked by increased peace, compassion, and a robust sense of interconnectedness with all of life. In the journey towards self-discovery and personal growth, the role of the ego often emerges as a primary hurdle. The ego serves important functions, such as protecting us and giving us a sense of identity. However, it can also foster a sense of separation, make us overly concerned with how we're perceived by others, and generate an endless stream of wants and fears. Two pivotal practices that can be particularly effective in overcoming the barriers erected by the ego are the cultivation of presence and the act of surrender. Being present means fully engaging with the current moment, rather than being distracted by thoughts, worries about the future, or memories of the past. The ego thrives on creating a narrative for us, often revolving around past grievances or future anxieties. The more we live in the past or future, the more we feed the ego's need for drama, thereby increasing its influence over us. Presence cuts through this noise. When we are fully present, we can see things more clearly, without the distortion of the ego's lens. This enables us to respond to life's challenges in a more balanced and effective way. Activities such as meditation, mindfulness exercises, or simply taking deep, conscious breaths can train the mind to be more present. The practice of surrender complements presence by requiring us to let go of the desire to control outcomes. One of the ego's primary functions is to maintain an illusion of control in an unpredictable world. It constantly urges us to manipulate circumstances and people to achieve what it sees as favorable outcomes. However, this need for control often backfires, leading to stress, anxiety, and ultimately, a sense of dissatisfaction. Surrender involves releasing this need to control, accepting that we cannot manipulate all variables, and trusting that things will unfold as they should. This doesn't mean adopting a passive approach to life. Rather, it's about doing our best and then letting go of attachment to the results. When we surrender, we open ourselves to the flow of life and often find that things work out more harmoniously than we could have orchestrated. Both presence and surrender are deeply interconnected. Being present helps us recognize when our ego is attempting to seize control, thus providing an opportunity to surrender. Likewise, the act of surrender allows us to be more present as we're no longer preoccupied with manipulating outcomes. Together, these practices act as a check on the ego's influence, enabling us to live more freely and authentically. Furthermore, as we cultivate presence and practice surrender, we find that our relationships often improve. When we are fully present, we can truly listen, understand, and connect with others. When we surrender the need to control, we allow others the freedom to be themselves, thereby inviting authenticity into our interactions. In summary, the importance of presence and surrender in overcoming the ego cannot be overstated. These twin practices can free us from the tyranny of constant doing and worrying, enabling us to experience a richer, more connected life. They empower us to move from a place of reactivity to one of thoughtful response, from a place of confinement to one of limitless possibility. The journey to disempowering the ego is undoubtedly challenging, but with the tools of presence and surrender, it becomes not just achievable, but also deeply rewarding. In today's modern society, the quest for external validation often takes precedence over the pursuit of inner fulfillment and spiritual growth. Social media platforms, advertising, and even interpersonal relationships can perpetuate the idea that our worth is measured by external achievements or the approval of others. However, this external focus can be an exhausting and unfulfilling treadmill. It can distract us from tapping into our inner selves and understanding our intrinsic value, which is not dependent on external circumstances. A profound shift from seeking external validation to prioritizing inner fulfillment and spiritual growth is a transformational journey that can lead to a deeper, more satisfying experience of life. The tendency to seek external validation is often a result of societal conditioning, and to an extent, an evolutionary need to belong and be accepted by a community. However, this need has been magnified and distorted by modern societal pressures. We compare ourselves incessantly to others, whether it's in terms of career success, physical appearance, or social popularity. These metrics of success are not only shallow but also constantly changing, leaving us in a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. The moment we attain one goal, another appears on the horizon, and the cycle continues. On the other hand, inner fulfillment and spiritual growth offer a more stable and lasting sense of happiness. By turning inward, we begin to ask deeper questions about our purpose, our passions, and what genuinely brings us joy and peace. This internal focus often involves quiet reflection, meditation, or engaging deeply with a spiritual or philosophical practice that aligns with our core beliefs. In doing so, we become less reactive to external circumstances and develop a form of contentment that is less dependent on external validation. We learn to measure our worth by our own standards and according to our own internal moral compass. The pursuit of spiritual growth goes hand in hand with inner fulfillment. Spirituality, regardless of whether it is connected to a particular religion, can offer deeper insights into the nature of existence, our role in the universe, and how we relate to others and the world around us. This greater understanding can enrich our lives in a way that material possessions or social status cannot. It can make us more compassionate, more empathetic, and more attuned to the needs of others, creating a virtuous cycle where our inner growth contributes to the well-being of those around us. However, making this shift is not easy, and often requires both conscious effort and a willingness to swim against the societal current. It involves identifying the triggers and habits that prompt us to seek external validation and consciously choosing to redirect our focus inward. Over time, the need for external approval lessens as we become more self-assured and internally referenced. This change doesn't happen overnight, but evolves gradually as we continue to invest in our inner selves. As we grow more spiritually and emotionally, we may find that our relationships deepen, our work becomes more meaningful, and we experience a more potent sense of peace and well-being. Importantly, the validation that comes from this internal focus is self-generated and therefore more sustainable in the long run. It gives us the resilience to face life's challenges with a greater sense of equanimity and the strength to contribute positively to the world around us. In essence, shifting our focus from external validation to inner fulfillment and spiritual growth is a transformative process that can liberate us from the shackles of societal expectations and lead us toward a more authentic, meaningful life. Service to others can be a transformative experience that not only benefits those we help, but also profoundly impacts our own lives. One of the most powerful outcomes of engaging in acts of service is the potential to reduce the influence of the ego. By nature, the ego is self-centered, focusing on individual needs, desires, and fears. It prioritizes the self over the community, often leading to behaviors that separate us from others. Through service, we can shift this focus from I to we, which in turn fosters feelings of unity and compassion, challenging the ego's stronghold on our actions and thoughts. When we engage in service, our attention is redirected towards the needs and well-being of others. This shift can be almost paradoxical. By losing ourselves in the act of helping others, we often find a deeper sense of self. This self is not the ego-driven identity that thrives on separation and competition, but a more compassionate, unified version of ourselves that recognizes the interconnectedness of all beings. By addressing someone else's needs, we are reminded that everyone shares common human experiences, like suffering, joy, and the quest for meaning, which can make our ego-based differences seem trivial in comparison. Serving others also forces us to confront our own vulnerabilities and imperfections. The ego often protects itself by projecting an image of perfection or superiority. Acts of service can shatter this illusion by exposing us to people from different walks of life who face various challenges, some of which we might never have encountered otherwise. This exposure can be a humbling experience, softening the ego and making us more empathetic and understanding. Furthermore, service provides an opportunity for us to practice compassion in action. Compassion challenges the ego because it calls on us to empathize with others and to act on that empathy, which is inherently a selfless activity. When we're compassionate, we can't maintain a facade of separation or superiority. We're called to acknowledge our shared human experience. As a result, the ego's influence begins to wane, making room for more unity and interconnectedness to flourish. Service can take many forms. Volunteering at a homeless shelter, mentoring a young person, caring for an elderly family member, or even simply offering a listening ear to a friend in need. Regardless of the specific act, the core principle remains the same. By focusing on someone else's well-being, we transcend our ego-driven desires and fears, which often leads to a reduction in suffering not only for the person we're helping, but also for ourselves. Moreover, the ripple effect of service should not be underestimated. When we serve others with a genuine sense of compassion and unity, those who benefit from our acts are more likely to engage in kind acts themselves. This creates a cycle of goodness that has the potential to extend far beyond our immediate community. It cultivates a culture of altruism where the collective focus shifts from me to we, reducing the influence of individual egos on a broader scale. In essence, service to others can be a powerful tool for reducing the ego and promoting a sense of unity and compassion. It offers us a practical way to transcend our self-centeredness, connect with others on a fundamental level, and contribute to the greater good. By integrating service into our lives, we can weaken the grip of the ego, thereby paving the way for a more harmonious, compassionate, and unified existence.